It's Baxi's Musical Podcast.
Back in the day, and by that I mean high school, I had an unnatural obsession with the band Yes. Now, that might come as a surprise to some of you folks who know me for being a fan of punk or new wave or alternative music. And while I do love that stuff, I'm full of surprises. The truth is, I own all of the classic Yes albums, a bunch of their solo records, and I've seen them play a bunch of times live as well. The truth is, the guys in Yes were some of the most incredible musicians of their time, maybe of any time. Their music was challenging, complicated, sometimes pretentious, but awesome all at the same time. Go ahead and listen to the album Close to the Edge someday. That album is pure genius from front to back. This is why I'm excited to talk to my guest today, Rock and Roll Hall of Famer Rick Wakeman. Now, most people associate Rick with the classic lineup of Yes that included Chris Squire, John Anderson, Steve Howe, Bill Bruford, but Rick's career didn't start there, nor did it end there. This is a guy that played with David Bowie and was nearly a member of the Spiders from Mars. This is a guy that played piano for Cat Stevens, even played for Elton John, the Strawbs, and Black Sabbath on a couple of their records as well. His solo career is a stuff of legend, both literally and figuratively. And over the years, Rick Wakeman has become a British national treasure, hosting talk shows, speaking all over the world, and performing his music. Rick will be performing here in Massachusetts, in Natick, Northampton, and in Fall River, and he's in the middle of working on yet another solo record. It's a real pleasure to talk to arguably one of the greatest keyboard players in rock history. This is my conversation with Rick Wakeman on Baxi's Musical Podcast.
Rick's just going to the toilet.
Well, you might want to switch the mic off then, Rachel.
Hello. Sorry, I need a new brain.
Okay, I'm going to leave you two to chat then.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks.
How are you, Rick?
I'm not bad. I'm sorry about it. It's really I've completely screwed my whole diary up for the last 2 weeks. I've managed to get everything wrong.
I think people forgive you though, Rick. I really do. That's
very kind. I'll quote you on that. Thanks.
So I'm looking forward to this. I actually have a couple of tickets for the show that you're doing at the Narrows in Fall River on the 19th, and I know you're coming to Northampton, Massachusetts on the 15th. And I can't tell you what I'm more excited about. I don't know if I'm more excited about the music or listening to the stories from the grumpier old rock star. Can't tell which one I'm more excited about.
Well, they're sort of intertwined. I mean, the stories are all very pertinent and relative in a strange way to the music and the things that I do. Funny enough, by my mother-in-law a few days ago, she said, "How come you've got so many stories?" And I said, "Well, actually, I've never really thought about it, but I said I've been doing playing live in bands for over 50 years, for like 53 years, 53 years. And I said, and somebody once said to me, nothing normal ever happens to you. And I was thinking to myself, well, you're only going to have two strange things happen or weird stories in 1 year. And I said, suddenly I've got 106 stories to tell. And it's true. So I never really sort of run out. And the funny thing is, when I go to places, it's so often I'll meet somebody before in the street, in the town or whatever, and they'll say, "Hey, we saw you 8 years ago here or 15 years ago here. Do you remember such and such happened?" And I'll go, "I forgot all about that." and you suddenly find that when you go down to the show, you can throw it in because the story comes back to you as to what happened.
You know, it's funny. I had read the first version of the Grumpy Old Rock Star book when it came out, 2008, 2009, and I just started reading it again to get ready for the interview. And there are some stories that are just so laugh out loud ridiculous. And I think you even said it in your introduction of the book that you're like the walking embodiment of Spinal Tap. Like there's so many ridiculous stories in the book, and then I haven't had a chance to read the second one, and I'm like, having read the first one a second time, like I have got to get book number 2.
The Further Adventures is actually more ridiculous than the first one. I'll tell you one thing actually that's interesting about the books. When I was asked to do them, I said, look, I don't want to do like a normal biography of just, oh, I was born on this day and I did that. And they said, well, how do you want to do it? And I said, well, the best autobiography of sorts that I ever read was David Niven's Bring on the Empty Horses. And I said, what was clever about that was it just started, and a lot of the story was about other people and the other people, how it had affected him. And he'd finished one story, and that would automatically have reminded him of another one to go into. And that's what, and I said, if I could do it like that, where it was not in any sort of chronological order, I think I can probably come up with something that will work. And they were very good. They went, okay, go on, off you go. So that's what we did. I mean, I have read it in recent years, both of the books, Grumpy Old Rockstar and The Further Adventures of a Grumpy Old Rockstar. And it's interesting because even some of those I've got, oh, I remember that. And I remember other things that were linked to it. So it's really quite weird. So I've decided I'm going to do a third one next year.
Oh, good. Good.
Yeah. An even more ridiculous adventures of a grumpy old rock star.
I've read a lot of rock biographies, and you're right. I mean, a lot of them start off very, very dry. But one of the things that seems to follow in at least the first book is that all of the best stories start off with an awful lot of alcohol. And then from there... Yeah. And then from there, it tends to metastasize into something remarkable. I can only imagine what it must have been like to be on tour with Rick Wakeman in the 70s.
Well, I'll tell you a little story. I don't think it's in any of the books, actually. We were so known, my band, the English Rock Ensemble, as being a heavy drinking band. I mean, we had a guy, sadly no longer with us, our tour manager, Funky Fat Fred. And Funky Fat Fred was, he was the worst tour manager ever. I mean, he was absolutely useless. He was so useless that other bands wanted him. AC/DC wanted him. I mean, he would do things like, we were meant to fly from London Heathrow Airport, and he would take us all to Gatwick Airport. We'd be at the wrong airport. We were going to Belgium one day, and he booked us to Bolivia. All sorts of things Fred did, he was just hilarious. Wrong hotels, but he was just wonderful. We love Fred. One of Fred's major jobs was to get everybody up in the morning to get ready to go. But Fred, we gave him what was lovingly known as the Golden Blanket Award because he couldn't get up, he couldn't wake up. So we used to take it in turns in the band to have a pass key to his room to go in and wake him up and go back to bed so he could get up and wake us up so he felt he'd done his job. That was typical Fred. But there are so many stories that just really, it just, I mean, I should tell. I mean, I'd forgotten all about Funky Fat Fred. Sadly, no longer with us, but a lot of the guys. But you're right about the drinking thing. One of Fred's jobs was on a UK tour was while we were playing to go and find a pub that would stay open. Because, of course, we had licensing laws back then and they all shut at 10:30, 11 o'clock. And we didn't come off stage till 11. So it was Fred's job to go around and find a pub that would stay open, lock the doors and leave us in there. It was just a very funny thing. And we had, in many years later, after sadly we'd lost Fred, the management, which is still the same management now of mine, used to send out tour managers in rota because they could only do about 3 weeks before they needed either medical treatment or come home for a holiday. And we did terrible things to some of those tour managers. There was one guy whose name will be, I won't mention because he's about to find out. He was very straight and we weren't, hardly drunk. In fact, he didn't drink really. And it was the end of his tenure of 3 weeks out with us. This was in Europe. and he was due to fly home. And he made the fatal mistake of it. Yeah, he was flying home, and he brought his suitcase to the show so he could go straight off to the airport afterwards. What a mistake! While he was there, I mean, we were very adept at it. We would sort of like lift the suitcase up, gauge the weight, then empty it of all his clothes, and then we put two big bricks, breeze block bricks, wrapped in towels in the case, so the weight and everything felt the same. This was I remember it very well because it was on a Friday, and the following Monday he was due to come back, and he never arrived. And I got a phone call from Sandy, the secretary in Brian's office, who said, we said, where is he? And she said, he's not coming. He's only just been let out of jail. And we went, what do you mean he's let out of jail? They said, well, he was arrested at Heathrow Airport. They opened his suitcase, found these two blocks of bricks and no clothes. So this is early days. This is back in the early 70s. So they took them away for forensic testing and locked him up over the weekend. And I don't think he ever forgave me to this day. But there were so many things like that we did. And you're right, they were all alcohol fueled. And it was I mean, we were pretty good on stage. We were pretty good boys, except for one show in Seattle, which is in one of the books. But the rest of the time, the drinking was, we'd have a few drinks on stage and a few drinks before. But you can't play the stuff if you're sort of drunk. So we save that to afterwards.
I would say that's probably true. I mean, most of your music is not exactly easy, love songs. Most of your music is pretty elaborate stuff that requires at least a little bit of either sobriety or concentration.
Well, somebody once said to me, you've got to be out your brain to write it, but be compos mentis to play it. And that's probably not a bad analogy, really.
I do want to talk to you about that a little bit because, I was always a very big Yes fan. And one of the things that I always stunned by is trying to imagine what it is like to learn a song that is 18 minutes long. I mean, it's one thing if you've been playing it for a while, but it's 18, like I'm thinking Close to the Edge, 18 minutes, or Heart of the Sunrise, 11 minutes. Learning that song and then having 5 guys know it well enough to play it in front of a ticket-paying audience, that had to be an amazing amount of work to be that much in sync and know the song without screwing it up every night. I can't even remember my phone number half the time.
You're right. I'll tell you a strange thing. I remember back in 2002 when I went back to the old classic lineup, as it used to be called, which I stayed with for another 3-4 years. And one of the things we decided to do was Close to the Edge. And what I did before I went out to join the guys, I played the track, the record. I had my rig set up, and I tried to play along with it. And however hard, I had no idea what was going on. And I thought, this is a nightmare. And then my engineer, great guy, Eric Jordan, said to me, don't even think about it. He said, when you're out there and and rehearsals start and you're playing with the guys, it will all come back, because it's the links between all of you of what happens. And I got out there and he was spot on right, because as soon as we started playing, Steve would do something and you automatically, your hands went to what was meant. I mean, I didn't get it 100% right, but it was initially, but it only took about 3 goes. Suddenly everybody knew exactly what we're doing, and also different for them because they hadn't played with me for a few years. So right. It was getting used to the things that I do. That's really what it is. It's the association between musicians, and that's one of the things that made Yes great in many ways, because there was for 5 totally different characters, I suppose you could say, right, in every possible way, there was a telepathic music link between us all that was quite uncanny. I mean, I've got it as well with Trevor Rabin. I mean, people have said to me on the ARW tour, you and Trev look over at each other quite a lot and smile. And is there a reason for that? So yeah, we're not in love sexually, but what it is that's quite interesting is that Trev will do something, and I know he was going to do it. And Trev
Wow.
said the same. He went, "I'll do something," and he, "Oh, I knew you were going to do that," even though I'd never done it before. And when that happens, you just look across and smile. And yes, certainly in the classic, yes, and certainly I would say with Trev, that was always there. And I think that's what made, for me, what made Yes stand out, if that sort of makes sense.
It does make sense, but I'm thinking back to when you first started, right before the Fragile album. I mean, you've been
Yeah,
playing with David Bowie from '69 to '71. Theoretically,
yeah.
you could have played with any band that you wanted. I mean, you at that point you were pretty highly touted as one of the best keyboard players in the world, if not the best in the world, and you chose to join them. And what was it about those guys that you said, "Oh yeah, I think these are the guys I want to play with."
Well, there's an interesting thing, really. I was with a band called Straubs, which I loved. I mean, we're still all great friends now. Dave Cousins and I are still good mates. And we supported Yes in 1970. And I think it was at Hull, a place called Hull, which is on the northeast coast of the UK. And we were supporting them. And Yes, we're just starting to people were starting to take note of them. They as being a, shall we say, a band of interest. I'd read a few articles about them and things, and I liked what I'd read from the guys, and I thought, well, I want to have a look at this band, and it was quite interesting. We played our set, and then Yes came on stage, and I sat there. And the thing that one of the first things you do is, because certainly back in 1970, was you looked at what equipment there was on stage. You looked to see what people use. Every bass player, all the great bass players, were using Fender jazz basses and had big Marshall stacks. The guitarists all had Stratocasters or Telecasters and big Marshall stacks, and the drummers all had various different kits, admittedly, but they all had enormous kits. The singer was always 6'3" with black greasy hair and had a tenor voice. That's what it was. But and Yes walked. And what was interesting was the guitar setup was two little Fender twin amps that were mic'd up. And I thought this is and on a guitar stand was a semi acoustic Gibson.
Right.
I thought this is all weird. And the bass setup was a pair of Sun cabinets and amps, and I never even heard of them. And it was just weird. And then Chris came on and plugged his bass in. And what was interesting was I'd never heard a bass sound where basically all the treble dial was turned up full, all the bass dial was turned up full, and all the middle was turned off. So you had this great sound which Chris made his own. I'm still convinced it was because his the middle dial didn't work, but that's by the by. It was a fantastic sound. Steve made such amazing sounds through these Fender twins, which was great. And then the singer walks on. Now most he's, as I say, 6'2", black hair or greasy hair, and tenor. And on came this little diminutive chap who, like a pixie, and had this wonderful alto voice. Bill Bruford mic'd his drum kit up. Now that was unheard of in the UK back then.
Right.
And had these great sounds on the drums. It was just astonishing. Probably the most standard there was Tony Kaye, good mate, and Tony played great rock organ and things. And he was probably the only part that you could say, oh, that's standard, for a rock band. And I sat back and heard what they did and the arrangements and things. I thought these guys are really good. I really, really like this. And it was interesting because I'd said in an article shortly afterwards that I really felt that keyboards were going to develop tremendously. That was the next thing to develop in musical terms, and that they could become, certainly in a progressive rock band, the orchestral section of the band. And that's what I felt that was a role that I would like to play if ever the opportunity came up. And I got a call from Chris. They went on tour with Iron Butterfly, I think it was, in America. Came home and Chris called me at 2 o'clock in the morning. It was very kind of him, and said, "Look, we want to go down this orchestral rock route, and we've read some of your articles. Would you consider? Would you like to come and talk to us and see what you feel about it?" And that's really how that started. They were not a big band in the UK at the time. I mean, I got asked to join with David Bowie's Spiders. They was just forming at the same time. David was huge in the UK, but yes, had that something that I thought, I've got something I felt I could offer to the band, and I felt that they had stuff to offer me. So music's all about give and take in a band. So I just felt that this was the right move, and I've been in and out of the band so many times now, and it's great because there's there should be a song really to cover myself, and yes, which is how can I miss you if I never go away, and and uh, and that about sums it up really.
And you've maintained like a solid friendship with John Anderson the entire time. I mean, you play with him and Trevor Rabin, and that did very, very well. But I look at your solo career, and then I did a little bit of research about the solo albums of Yes members. To the best of
Yeah.
my knowledge, those three records, and the Six Wives, Journey to the Center of the Earth, and Myths and Legends. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, I think those sold more copies than all those other solo records did combined. So obviously, when you're performing this music, and then you're performing it with these elaborate stage shows, it's funny because a lot of people will say, well, Rick Wakeman was performing in a pretentious way, but when I'm reading your book and explaining, and you're explaining what you're doing, there's a part of me saying he's just trying to see how much he can get away with, and they were giving it to you.
There's an element of truth in that. I mean, I often say, I mean, believe it or not, I take the music very seriously, but I don't take myself seriously.
Yeah.
That's I suppose why it works. I always believe when I was at the Royal College that one of the things that I found difficult to cope with in the 60s was there were so many different genres of music, but none of them ever combined. The classical people hated the rock people. The pop music people hated the hard rock people. The jazz people, they didn't like anybody, and the folk people were out on their own. And I thought, this is ridiculous. There should be ways. Music is all about fusion. So certainly you can combine the best areas of each one of those and put them in and make them work. And that's why I was asked to play with the London Symphony Orchestra, who were doing a version of Tommy. This was back in 1970. 71. They were doing a version of Tommy, and I was asked if I would play the keyboard parts with them at the live concert at the Rainbow, and I said I'd love to because I'm a huge Who freak, and John Edwards was one of my very, very best friends, and also I just like the idea. The arrangements that were done for that version of Tommy were just sensational, absolutely brilliant. And when I played that, I thought, you know what? There is so much more you can do with an orchestra and a band. And one of the things that I remember going home and thinking, if I write some music and I want to use an orchestra, I don't want to have it as what I call an orchestral accompaniment. I don't want here's the music and some guy or whatever here's a string part that goes with it. I want the band to be part of the orchestra and the orchestra to be part of the band,
Right?
Not separate entities joined together. And that's been my ethos all the way through. Journey was the first thing where I tried it. I think in King Arthur, I got it much closer to exactly as I felt it should be. And by the time I got to Return to the Center of the Earth, I felt I know how to do this now. But it was, yeah, I mean, I have fun with everything. Music should be fun. I want people to be entertained. I like either at a concert or on record. I'd like to create as many emotions as possible. You know, I don't think there's anything wrong with people shedding a tear at a concert or laughing out loud for whatever reason. As I say, I don't take myself seriously, but every note I play, it's there for a reason.
Well, Rick, I am really looking forward to these shows coming up to Massachusetts, and again in Northampton at the Academy of Music on the 15th of October, and at the Narrows in Fall River a few days later on the 19th. I could spend all day talking to you, Rick, but I know you're kind of short for time. But I do appreciate you taking the time out today. It's been a real pleasure.
No problem. No, make sure you come and say hello at the show.
I will absolutely. If I can get to the stage, I will do it.
Brilliant.
Thank you, Rick. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, mate.
Like I said, I could have talked to Rick Wakeman for hours because we barely touched on some of his best wondrous stories. Nevertheless, I hope you enjoyed the podcast. If you did, feel free to share it, review it, tell all your friends about it. You can email me at bax@rock102.com. I'd love to know what you think. Thanks again for listening to Baxy's Musical Podcast.